Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted. I'm your host, ObjectivelyDan. Hey, do you hear that? What's that commotion? It's my good buddy Ocean here with me today.
You just did that.
Yeah.
I hear a little bit of an echo, I think.
A little bit of an echo. We'll try to fix that. There's always an echo here because for some reason, whenever we go live, that's how it happens. If you're watching this live on the YouTube right now, you'll notice these sick Ray-Bans that somebody left here at the ACA. You should come pick them up. Otherwise, I'm taking them home. But also, check out these shirts, y'all. Truth Wanted shirts. It's happening. It's real. Check out the back. Oh, it's good stuff. Yes. So we have shirts
with the phone number on them.
With the phone number on it. So if they're here at the ACA. So if you actually come by the ACA, you can buy them. Today, we're going to try to work it out pretty soon where you can get them online. But if you are interested in picking one up, definitely email me at truth@atheist-community.org. And it's here, folks. We've been talking about them for a long time. We're probably going to get some hats here pretty soon, too. And I'm going to take these off because I'm inside and I shouldn't be doing that. But, yeah, I'm so excited. This looks super awesome. I've been wanting one of these for so long, and it's so satisfying to pick up something and look at it and say, like, wow, I made a thing that's on a t-shirt now, and I just enjoy it. It's really great. So, but
it's not a t-shirt?
Yeah, that's right. So let's get to our guest here tonight. This is Ocean. What do you go by? Ocean the Barbarian, Ocean the Wizard. You have
Ocean the Barbarian is like my Twitter handle. I changed the. It's been the Wizard. It's been the Necromancer. I've made a bunch of necromancy puns for like the month of October last year.
Yeah.
I've been it's been the Barbarian on Twitter for some time. I fight a little bit sometimes over there.
Yeah.
Don't judge.
So this is Ocean's second appearance here on Truth Wanted. He did a pre-show with us back in the day, which you should go check out before we were really doing this stuff live and stuff. But yeah, this is Ocean. He's a friend of the show. He's really our resident pagan expert. I
think it's technically my third time on the show.
Yeah, that's true.
Recall that one time.
There was that one time, which, if you know what we're talking about, was a pretty funny moment. But So the difference between now and last time is you actually have a YouTube channel now that you've been working on. Like, tell us about that a little bit.
So, people have been saying, like, I've been around the community for some time, and people have been saying, Ocean, do a fucking channel, like, tell us things about what you believe or whatever. Yeah. And I didn't think it would be a thing necessarily. So I started doing it around April, leading up to Faithless Forum, and I went to Faithless Forum, and since then the channel's blown up a little bit as far as like relative size. It's in April it was around 600 subs at that point. Now it's I think it's just past 2,800, which is really quick growth. I'm pretty impressed. It's like I've been impressed with it. I'm kind of like wowed by it. I'm like, okay, all right, guys, you think I'm doing cool? Let's do a thing.
Well, it's kind of interesting because, people knew kind of who you were, obviously, before the YouTube channel and stuff. So you get a bit of growth there. But also, I think it's because you're kind of tackling, at least I'm not sure what that kind of community's video scape is like. But to me, it's a niche kind of category of videos from a different perspective than at least what's in my general recommended feed, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel that. Like, there's not very many pagan channels. There is a handful, but generally they don't jump into philosophy like I do, or they are very focused on like one particular subset of polytheism. And a lot of times they might be pagan, but they're not polytheists. So polytheists are kind of looking for something. I've gotten messages from polytheists before I started a channel saying, you're on all these other channels, you should make your own stuff, just so that you can get some of your arguments out there in a non-conversation setting. So because before that, like, everything that had me in it was like an hour or two long. So I started making like kind of bite-sized stuff between 5 and 15 minutes, each explaining like a concept that I've used in a debate or that I've used in conversation to try and make a point. And Mainly among them that have been popular lately that I've been seeing people use are frith, which essentially means a mutual respect between people. And the other one is latent Christianity, which is like the latent aspects of Christian culture or cultural or social baggage that people carry with them even after they've left Christianity, that sometimes results in behavior that's like exclusive or the need to convert people or those kind of things.
Yeah, and that's something that we talked a little bit about last time, which is interesting because we both come from Christian backgrounds a little bit.
Right.
So we both kind of share at least some of that baggage that comes with that. And I know I've worked on that myself in the way that I communicate with people, in my judgments about people, in the way that, I kind of organize myself around with others. Like there's definitely, for a while, I'd say that a lot of that is gone now, but who knows? I'm sure like some of that is still kind of latent in there that I don't even think about, because it's so subconscious.
And I talk a little bit about some of the things that wind up popping up and that sometimes you don't even realize it's there. I had a little Jesus Christ in a carry-on suitcase pop up and explain what it is.
Yeah. What's a good example? Can you, like, for people who aren't familiar, maybe what we're talking
so
about?
One that I see every once in a while is a need to convert people. That is like, if you don't hold the exact same position as I do, you are less than or not worthy of respect or something like that. And and that there can't be like a difference of agreement or a difference of position. Rather, we have to agree on every little thing, which is something that pops up in just the Christian history of denomination splitting. Like as soon as they disagree on one little thing, they can't cooperate anymore. Fuck it. We got to split up. We got to do all this other shit. Yeah. And we see that in like when people leave Christianity, sometimes they still take that you have to not believe in God the right way or something like that. So, which is something I've seen a couple of times, and I'm like, I don't know, you guys maybe should calm down about that. But it shows up, and I say that like it sounds like I'm talking about atheists when I say that, but I'm talking about pagans too, because we do that shit just as often.
Well, also, it's important to point out that I don't think this is exclusive to Christians either, but it definitely is in the Christian culture so much to where, like, my thing is a result of Christianity, right? And I'm sure like, yours was, like, that's the most common thing that we see because that's the majority kind of religion around here. That's what you see.
But if you're talking to somebody like an ex-Muslim activist, for example, they're gonna be using latent Islam, which in some like is subtly different, but in some cases better, in some cases worse.
Yeah, so it's interesting because it's the culture that affects us more than the beliefs now. Because like even though we've transitioned from that beliefs, the culture is still there, kind of integrated in the way that we communicate with each other and organize lives, which I just think is fascinating. It just says a lot about how religion plays in our society, right? Like how it actually functions in the real world. It's less so about the theology sometimes and more about the hierarchies that we create in ourselves, right? So,
and that feeds in a little bit to a concept that most recently I made a video on the Trinity recently, but just before that I did a video on superstition, which I've used a definition that the ancient Greeks used, which is the fear of the supernatural such that it impedes on one's life or liberty. That's a simplified definition. I give the full one in the video, but there are times where people in their adherence to the supernatural or adherence to just religion in general will adhere to it in such a way that they want to impede, that they seem to impede on their own lives or enforce it in such a way that it affects other people's freedoms. Gay marriage, for example, is a huge one in our history.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so like, it's weird because again, like it's so common now. Like for us, like there's nothing that we have to sacrifice in letting other people marry each other, like two men wanting to marry each other or two women. But when I was a Christian, that was such a bigger deal to me. And even though like it wasn't my life to control, it wasn't, I have nothing to do with these other people, yet for some reason, this was something that bothered me. And this was something that I was told, one, I shouldn't even be thinking about, but two, like I should have this opinion about this and shouldn't consider, any other options, which I don't know. I don't know why that was so necessary. I don't know why, like, what the advantage was of having a belief like that, because it really didn't serve me in any way. And if anything, it caused more harm and strife in my life, right?
Yeah, I guess I was as a Christian for a period of time, I was like I had that position of, well, maybe it's not marriage, maybe it's civil liberties or something like that. And, that position, looking back on it, was ridiculous. There wasn't really a reason for me to hold that. It was simply, I think that that had a lot to do with that cultural Christian background of just like carrying that along with me, right? Like all of a sudden, okay, well, I mean, and even then, actually, I was a Christian still at the time. But once I left Christianity, the reasons for holding those kind of positions where I have to enforce it on somebody else started to drop away fairly quickly. And the further I get from Christianity, the more I see that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for me, it was like, I think the older I got, especially in college, when you start to, like, I was particularly in a city where it's very multicultural, got to see lots of different people from around the world with different kinds of ideas and practices. And it's like, it became weirder and weirder for me to talk about my own ideas, because when you compared it to other people, it's like, oh, it doesn't sound as good anymore when I say this kind of stuff out loud, talking about like the roles of men and women of what I think they should be in society or
oh boy.
No, like that was like, real beliefs that I had. That was just like, oh, like now that I'm really thinking about it, kind of examining it, it's really uncomfortable for me to just be like, hey, not because inherent to the belief, right, is this idea of, oh, not only do I think that this should be the way things are, but you should think this too. Like that's just it's kind of built in there, and it's hard to circumnavigate that. And I see a lot of Christians today do try to circumnavigate that a little bit, like, trying to, I don't know, I don't want to say make it more wishy-washy, but the emphasis on, you know what I'm saying, right? Like,
there's some Christians that can kind of pull it off a little bit. Like when you get into versions of Christianity, like Episcopalianism, I'm an ex-Episcopalian. When I started out as a Southern Baptist, and then I went into the Episcopalian church, and things changed like a whole lot. Just like even the approach to what Jesus is in the first place is radically different from the Episcopalian approach to the Baptist approach. And even though I have like some ill will in the back of my mind towards my experiences as a Baptist, I don't hold anything like that towards the Episcopalian experience. I find that they have like a little bit more tolerant of approach. I didn't have any Episcopalians witnessing to me in the same sense that I would have evangelicals do it. But the issues that I do still have is when they have things like hell belief, that in that same sense of what I was terming a superstition is a source of a lot of that reason to enforce on others. Like now you're trying to save people from hell and that kind of stuff. And that still exists in Episcopalianism. It still exists in most I would have to say most forms of Christianity, because there are some that don't include it.
Right.
But it's like every Christian has a different idea of what hell is, I guess.
The reason for converting, the reason for spreading the religion even becomes different, even when you switch to the denomination stuff, which is a fascinating thing to consider. But
yeah, absolutely.
I do want to get to some calls, but before we do that, I do want to talk about your Trinity video recently, which I found to be very interesting.
That was fun.
Yeah, like so you decided to tackle the Trinity. Like, what made you want to make a
I've done 2 debates on it in the past, and both of them were very like spur of the moment, where somebody would call me up and say, hey, I've got a Christian who wants to debate, and I'd be like, all right, well, let's talk about the Trinity. I got pulled into one on Non Sequitur show, and I got pulled into one on Modern Day Debate, and I wanted to make a video that kind of like just took the arguments that I've used in those conversations and boiled them down as to why I think the Trinity is just completely incoherent. It's a position that I've held for some time, that it's this idea of the Holy Spirit, the Father, and Jesus are 3 separate entities, but they are also all God that is one entity, but they are not each other. It gets into trying to make that make sense. There's a number of ways to make it make sense, but all the ways to make it make sense are heretical.
Yeah.
So Christians have kind of screwed themselves in order to actually make it a coherent concept. So my position is that, as described, the doctrine of the Trinity is that little graph that you see. It's incoherent. There's no way to actually defend it.
Yeah, and that was an interesting thing that I discovered when I was researching the Christian religion a lot more heavily. It was like, oh, this Trinity thing? Yeah, that wasn't like, I mean, that came a little bit later. Like the word Trinity, like figuring out, oh, the word Trinity doesn't even appear in the Bible. What?
Well, yeah, like and they'll say that.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: is that they'll say, the Trinity doesn't appear in the Bible, but there's all the scriptural evidence for it.
Yeah.
That's scriptural evidence of polytheism in the Bible. Look out!
Look
hot
out. Takes. Hot
takes.
Yeah.
But, it's they want to be monotheists, and they have polytheistic elements of their religion. The Trinity is how they make that make sense.
But see, Ocean, the Trinity, so it's just God. It's just he's wearing different hats. That's all it is.
That's modalism, man. That's a heresy. Get out of my house.
That's what I was taught. That was I've heard
wearing different hats.
Yeah, he's wearing different hats.
It's God the shapeshifter. God's now Mystique from X-Men.
Right? No, but yeah, it was always. But then there's even the apologetic though that I always heard was, oh well, yeah, it doesn't make sense. But like that's just the mystery of God. Like that's just kind of we'll never fully know.
It's a mystery of God, and we can't understand him, and then I can't know what God is. If you're going to say that it's a mystery and therefore I must believe it, I have to believe in something that I don't know. I don't know what it is. I can't cover it. So how do I believe it if I don't know what the fuck it is? I have a lot of trouble with that. Can I just cuss? Can I do that on this show? I don't even know.
Yes, you're allowed. You have permission. We earned that explicit
fucking great
tag. Yeah, absolutely.
But so that's one of the things that bothers me. Another objection that people put forward is that God transcends logic.
Oh yeah.
That means God's illogical. If the grounding of logic isn't logical, that creates all kinds of problems, because that's another argument that Christians will put forward is the Transcendental Argument. They'll say that God is the grounding of all logic, and they make a connection there. But if the Trinity is how God is described and there's an illogical component there, all of a sudden the grounding of logic is illogical, which the whole reason why God can't lie is because he's the grounding of goodness, of morality. So now you want to try and say that rule doesn't apply with logic. Now God's illogical. Now he's just not only illogical but inconsistent. Everything is screwed.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. Like, see, and this is it's so funny because when you and I talk, it's always we're always deconstructing Christianity together. I remember last night we were hanging out. We were hanging out outside of Baylor University campus. And I was worried that we were speaking too loud because we were right on campus at the coffee shop.
Oh, that's right.
And Peep, there is some Bible.
It was a Christian school. You didn't tell me that. So I'm sitting there. I was like, he says, "Let's go get coffee." I'm like, "Sure." So I go to this spot. We go get coffee, right? I'm sitting there and we're just talking away. And I'm thinking it's a coffee shop, like where I'm from. You can talk about whatever. I live like just down the road from a college as well, and it's like, all right, cool. You can speak about whatever it please you, but then you're like, oh, by the way, this is a Christian campus. I'm like, fucker, what are you talking about?
It's only the largest Christian school in the state. Like,
okay, good job. All right, cool. Yeah, it was a little forewarning next time, please.
No, sir. But because nobody's ever gonna say anything to us, but like I think there was a Bible study going on at another table, and I'm pretty sure. I'm 90% sure you.
I didn't catch that.
I'm 90% sure you said something like, "Oh yeah, the Trinity is bullshit" or something, and then like I saw that girl look at us, and that was the moment where I was like, "Hey, just by the way, we are at a Christian school." Yeah. So it was fun. It's a good time. But you ready to get to some calls, man?
I guess we can do that. Yeah, man.
Cool. Let's do it. I want to go to Brian in Dundee, Ireland. Hey, Brian, what's up?
We've got an Irishman.
I'm Scotland, not Ireland.
Oh, Scotland. All right, well, that's our call screener then, putting the wrong thing there. Uncultured swines they are, getting those countries mixed up. So anyway, what's up, Brian? How can we help you today?
Hi, Dan. Hi, Ocean. Big fans of both of you, by the way. So sorry to kiss but there we go.
Great to see that there's fans all around the world watching this show. Really cool to see.
Oh, every episode from the start, by the way. Dan.
Heck yes! I love it. All right.
So yeah, basically, I want to discuss a little thought that I had, that maybe the founding fathers got it wrong to separate church and state.
Okay. Yeah,
okay.
So the reason that I'm saying that, because in the UK, we don't have separation of church and state. And I know that Finland as well, amongst others, they don't have separation of church and state. So because of that, religion, or the state religion, Church of England being the UK's established religion, it's kind of seen as being, a bit boring, a bit old hat. And I think that, if America had a Church of America, they may be in the same position as we are now, where just under 15% of the population still adhere to the Church of England, and now we're talking about disestablishment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Dan, carry on.
Well, I was just going to say it is interesting because we are a much more religious country than you overall, and yet we have those church and state separations. And I've thought about this, and I think part of it is because I think maybe if the church becomes a part of the state, and the state is an entity that's supposed to be a public servant to all, then the church kind of adapts that in some ways as far as its general policy towards things. And I don't know, the money is tied differently as well, and how these churches get funded and stuff. You obviously don't have as many mega churches and stuff that we probably do over here in the States.
I'm not sure.
No, I don't.
Go ahead.
Go, Ocean. What's up?
So my thought is that this, looking at a little bit of oh god, you full screen me, you stress me out. The history of America that I'm aware of has the separation between church and state originally was meant for the federal government, but it didn't necessarily apply to state governments. And in fact, you did have in the early days of the states, each state did have a church that it would prefer. I think that if you had a uniting Church of America, it would have pissed off a lot of people really early, because whereas in Britain you have an Anglican culture, in America it was a very Protestant culture, and people were actually coming to America for religious freedoms of getting away from state churches. So even though the states in the colonies had, or in the newly independent newly independent United States had churches that were kind of preferred in each state, the freedom of being able to practice whatever you wanted was a huge value from the outset. And having a state church or having a federal church would have been a big cause of disagreement, similar to there were a number of issues that the states started settling by just saying, let the states decide it. Slavery was one of those issues. Slavery wound up resulting in a civil war later, and I think that a federal church might have caused a similar sort of strife. It's the way that America was set up with the designation of different states. There's a lot of alternate history components there that you would want to explore if you were to try and say that, well, we should have had a federal church from the beginning. And there was a lot of resistance to it, the idea of there being a federal church.
Just so I'm clear, when you say federal church, do you mean a church
a Church of America?
Okay, so the state church would be individual states, and the federal would be all of America.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there were kind of state denominations, sort of. There were you did have. The First Amendment, as far as freedom of religion, wasn't treated the same way that it is today at the founding of the states. You did have, there are laws that are still in the books in some states that an atheist can't hold elected office in some cases.
Yes.
So
Texas is one of those states as well.
Right. And that was considered enforceable at the time. Mm-hmm. And there were also regulations in some states on who could immigrate to those states, whether or not a Catholic or a Jewish person could immigrate. There was in Georgian history, there was a big controversy about a boat of Jewish individuals coming over, and I can't remember exactly what the result of it was, but I remember that Oglethorpe had to settle that issue. It's a good little tidbit of Georgian history in there, but. There was a lot of religion regulation at that time, and I feel that if let's steelman it and say there was a federal church, I feel like that federal church would have resulted in being a very evangelical kind of church, in order to get the support of the people, because there was a strong, even though the founding fathers weren't necessarily evangelicals, a lot of the population was.
Yeah,
and there's a number of famous preachers in the early days of American history that can attest to that point.
Yeah, and I would add on to that as well that, I mean, even some denominations of Christianity are almost exclusive to America, even because those splits are happening even here. I mean, heck, Mormonism is basically an American religion as well, if you think about it. So, like,
that should be the federal church, is the Mormon Church.
Right, exactly. So we're talking about a population who, at least at the time of its founding, I think was definitely more diverse in its religious, opinions than probably what we would see in Scotland or England at the time, I imagine. But yeah, so I don't know if it could even happen. Just like, just based on the fervor of what we saw in the States at the time. I don't know if I'd like. There would be advantages in this. Like if we had a church and it ended up being the same way as it would be in the UK or just in Europe in general with those kinds of state churches, I'd be cool with that. I don't know, just because of the American religious tradition, if it would end up that way. Maybe the state would be even more corrupt. But
yeah, our early history is very religious.
Yeah, for sure.
To the point where I think that if there was a church, it would wind up being something like that. And it's entirely possible that we would have had a chilled out church, and that might have affected our culture, because the combination of church and state in at least in Europe has led to the state neglecting enforcing anything regarding the state religion. But that history is very different with, say, Russia.
Yeah.
So America could have gone that route very easily.
It's true. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I think that you make a good point. I think, Dan, when you said that you think that if you had a Church of America, it would be a bit more evangelical, and then Ocean, you went on to say about the early history of the church when it was a lot more puritanical. It's always, it's wishful thinking, what could have been and things like that.
I'll tell you. Yeah. So I don't know if you've seen this. Sorry, I am interrupting you. I do want to hear you. But recently on Netflix, they've released the Prayer Breakfast documentary series. I can't remember what it's called. But it's talking about how the National Prayer Breakfast, which is this informal organization within the United States, has been influencing American politics for decades. Particularly presidents like Ronald Reagan and stuff were influenced by Bill Clinton and other folks. And so, like, it's interesting because the informal ties between our state and religion are already there. There is already religious influence there, but it's just not working on official levels. It's through these kinds of informal connections and stuff like that. And that's kind of a difference in culture as well than what you'd see, in Europe and places like that.
It would also legitimize laws. Having a state church in America, I think that it would have legitimized efforts to make minority religions illegal.
Yeah.
So my faith, for example, probably wouldn't be tolerated in this country. Islam would face a similar challenge. The First Amendment, as structured and as interpreted as a separation between church and state by the Supreme Court, has been a safety net for religious liberties in this country because of kind of the overwhelming presence of evangelical Christianity throughout our history.
Yeah,
it's not something it's chilled out over the course of American history.
Yes, for sure. But back to Brian, I do want.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian.
I would say that the Church of England is kind of seen as like a Catholic light. When you look at all the ceremony and the dress and rituals and things, it's
all the costumes, half the guilt.
Catholic Church.
Yeah,
that's it. Well, there's some things coming out I think they've got plenty to feel guilty about, but you could look into that. But yeah, I think that, even now, I know that the ACA fights for the separation of church and state, as do many other organizations. I think you should just let them have it and fight out to see which one becomes the religion of America. Then they might all look and think, well,
listen,
if that's bullshit, mine's just bullshit.
Here's what I'll say to that, though, Brian. The religion of America, at least the ones that are fighting for the mingling of that, they're not in my interest, because we're seeing this stuff right now happening with abortion laws almost on the brink of changing and making that illegal in places. I mean, we're seeing all kinds of troublesome things. This the discrimination against gay people in businesses and stuff. Like, that's unfortunately like that's what it would be. I think if we didn't fight that fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I know it's not something that I think it's definitely not a fight that you should give up. It's something that unfortunately, people on the side of separation of church and state have found themselves having to fight for it.
Yeah.
And, it is just a little bit of a kind of funny thing that I think to myself. If America had a Church of America, then it might be completely different. And you were speaking about the things that are happening in Alabama. Mm-hmm. We had something similar a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. It barely registered in the national news. Our government said, no, we'll have it this way. We don't really care about your opinions on the matter. Mm-hmm. We've heard you, we've listened to you, but your opinions don't make a big dent in what's going on in our culture. And I do, I love living in Scotland. It's a really secular place. We've got churches closing left, right, and centre. And we do have a bit of a Mormon problem, but we'll get past that pretty quickly.
A Mormon problem.
I think that Utah's Mormon problem is a little bit more advanced than Scotland's, though. Just to be
only slightly. There's a little bit of a joke going in Dundee. You're more likely to run into a Mormon than get on a seagull, and seagulls are everywhere. But yeah.
That's pretty good. There was a joke. David Olivero.
Wait till the seagulls start riding up to your door in bicycles.
I used to live in Waco, where David Olivero is from, and he had this joke where he said, "Yeah, there's more Christians than people that live in Waco." And I was like, I like that one a lot. But right, I like it. It's a good thought experiment. Like, what are some pro arguments for the non-separation of church and state? That's something I don't always think about. I'm glad that you brought it up. It was a good topic to call in. So thanks for doing that with us today.
Yeah, well, absolutely, man. There's only one show for that question, and that's with yourself.
That's right. Yeah. All right, you can't build.
Thanks for calling in, man.
Yeah, you can't boost my ego like that. I'll get too hyped, and then I'm just it goes straight to my head. But no, thank you again for calling in, Brian. I love that you're a fan, and you gotta look. I got these shirts now. All right, maybe you should think about ordering one from me. All right.
Do you have any mugs?
Mugs yet? It's happening. We're going to work on those. Like I said, the caps are coming next. I want to get some mugs, but we're building a little library here. Got the shirts though. So,
well, if the truth wanted caps take over the MAGA caps, then we could all be very happy.
You know what? I'll be very happy too. Thanks again, Brian. We'll talk to you later.
Good night, man. Take care.
See ya.
Thanks.
Oh man, fun stuff. Yeah.
You should have sent me a shirt, man.
Dude, look, I just got these today. All right, slow your roll, okay? It's happening though. Look, I'm just like, one day, Ocean, you're gonna get a T-shirt with your avatar on it, and you'll feel what I'm feeling right now. It's pretty good, dude. I know it's just gonna last a day, but like, I don't know, it's fun. Yeah, that was a good call. Like, I like thinking about like alternate histories of America, right? Like, what would that be like?
I love alternate history conversations. Yeah. Love them. If there's no way to really give any sort of like knowledge in it, but I do think that it's like alternate history conversations I find are just like a wonderful game of chess, of history chess to have, just because you wind up with like all these little things that could have affected one thing or another, and looking at state churches and like all the different directions they've gone to, just that's a really fun conversation.
Yeah, it makes you think about how we got to the place that we are. Like what are the results of that, and like where can we go from here? Those you got to study history so you don't repeat it. That's what they always say. So let's go to another caller here, though. I want to go to Jimmy in San Antonio, who I think has a relevant topic here. Hey, Jimmy, can you hear us?
What's up, Jimmy?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
What's up, Jimmy?
Hey, what's up, Dan? Hey, what's up, Ocean? Yeah. I just wanted to introduce maybe you guys to a topic or a certain interpretation of found in Christian mysticism of the Trinity. The Trinity was developed later by mystics who wanted to understand the nature of God, or the nature of what they referred to as the Father, but not the Father as a paternalistic being, as in, Michelangelo's painting of the old man, the long white beard. It was more used in the sense of how Plotinus referred to the one. It was it was a term to refer to what's known as the absolute in philosophy. And so in the mystical interpretation, the Son is the man or woman that is the conduit that receives insight into the Father by means of the Holy Spirit, or even what neuroscientists today are calling mystical experience. It's a phenomenon in consciousness. And at least that's the interpretation in our modern neuroscience. And so I guess I'm just really calling to ask if you guys have ever came across that interpretation in Christian mysticism.
This sounds like Arianism a little bit. Do you believe that that Christ was like, did the Father beget Christ? Is that what you're?
Well, if you recall, in I think it's John 10, chapter 30, Christ is saying, "I and Father are one," and right. So to have the Holy Spirit is to have a direct experience of the Father. Or the way they would phrase it is they would call it a dissolution into the absolute, or a merging. So that's why you have this phrasing, "I and the Father are one," because it's considered kind of a merged consciousness.
If Jesus and the Father are one, and Jesus prayed to the Father, what was happening?
Well, in Christian mysticism, original prayer is contemplation. So it's a direct experience with you could say a philosophical absolute.
Mm-hmm. So what you're wind up looking at here, this is turning into modalism. Now Jesus isn't actually praying to the Father, so the Father and Jesus are not separate entities. Yeah, you've that little graph that you have. Now that Jesus praying to the Father is just contemplation. Jesus is the Father. You don't have an is not between the Son and the Father. You're just looking at this as a true monotheism thing, and you're labeling his different actions as one thing or another, which winds up kind of like becoming modalist. So, I mean, and there's a thing that I'll put forward is that modalism is a heresy, but it's also coherent. If a Christian wants to put forward an idea that they're just going to be heretical and call it a day, then fine. I don't have much of an issue with that. But you're not defending the doctrine of the Trinity anymore. You're defending a heresy.
Well, I mean, there is modern science to back up, this stuff, and I don't know if you're familiar with it at all, but I am referring to an interpretation that can be found in Christian mysticism, and it's not. I don't think it's exclusive to Christianity. I think the way it's expressed, especially in the research, is that all religions express a word to describe that experience. There's a very similar concept in Hinduism that you could compare.
Are you suggesting that Hindus are actually Christians?
Well, I'm suggesting that underlying core truth found in mysticism is universal to the major religions.
Right, so you're kind of you're approaching religion with sort of a perennialism, which is it's essentially a mass relabeling of all religions into a Christian definition, which now you're just trying to assert your version of a spiritual experience over everyone else's spiritual experience has ever experienced one. And it's an especially weird thing that Christians try and do, is to justify their monotheism by relabeling every other faith as Christian. And I don't get that approach. Like, why not relabel Christianity under a Hindu setting? Is there a reason not to do that?
I disagree.
I will add on to this because, what you're talking about here, Ocean, is interesting because the Hindus that I've talked to, when they talk about Jesus, like at least what was described to me as Jesus was a spiritual master, and so it goes both ways. Like there's the framing of Jesus under Hindu lenses. Like I think what we're kind of getting at here is are there experiences which you can find commonalities in that people would describe as religious experiences through mysticism? Yes, absolutely. I think that you can definitely compare and contrast. But
that's why you see mystics in a number of different traditions.
Yeah,
the thing that I have an issue with is saying that all mystics are Christian because they have mystical experiences.
Yes, and so this was because this hits heavy with me because on the tail end of my Christianity, I identified as a Christian mystic because this was the lens I was using. I was doing the same thing. I was like, oh, I'm looking at the neuroscience that kind of Jimmy is talking about. It's like, oh, well, we're all having these experiences and stuff. There must be talking to maybe one universal consciousness or like there's something out there beyond myself. But I did frame it under that Christian lens. I still did call myself a Christian mystic. Why I don't use that label anymore is because I realize
you're an atheist.
Well, I'm an atheist now, but there's that. But part of it was because there wasn't, the same as kind of what you're saying, Ocean, is I didn't have a reason to call it Christian. Like those labels and stuff, I realized that was a result of my cultural understanding and the terminology that I just kind of used. But, it wasn't really grounded on anything. It was just, what I was used to. Now, maybe Jimmy has reasons as to why we should think that they are specifically Christian. I don't know, but I'd be interested to hear.
I was going to argue against that because Ocean mentioned perennialism. If you're referring to the perennial philosophy, it doesn't have a bias towards Christianity. It's not even a religion in and of itself.
No, but your expression of it does.
Well, no, I don't have a version of it. I'm not saying that Christianity is the true mystic experience, and all religions are trying to emulate that. That's not what I'm saying at all.
That's what it sounded like you were saying. So if you're not saying that, and you're saying that, like are you a polytheist then? Are you recognizing that Hindus and other religions are actually following deities that are distinct from the Christian one?
No, I would consider myself an adherent of the perennial philosophy. I actually study the perennial philosophy very deeply.
All right, so you're a perennialist, but you're not holding that the Christian. So you're just a monotheist that believes that there's, I don't know. You explained it in a very Christian way, which makes me think that you're holding a Christian bias in your perennialism.
No, I opened with that because I was watching the show throughout, and you guys mentioned it earlier. You said you couldn't find any sense in the Trinity. And I think there is a way that it does make sense, but I don't think it's exclusive.
Oh yeah, you described. So, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what if you look at what my video? You probably haven't seen it. What I do is I explain the different heresies of the Trinity in order to make it coherent. But all of those coherent constructs of the Trinity are heresies. They're not the doctrine of the Trinity. So if you're going to say, well, I can describe the Trinity in a way that is coherent, then I'm like, sure, yes, fine, but that's going to fit into one of these heresies. So, if you want to hold to a heresy in your interpretation of the Trinity, then call it a day. You're a heretic. But, that you're agreeing with me at that point to say that the Trinity, the doctrine of the Trinity, is incoherent, but you can be a modalist. And what you described was essentially modalism.
I think it's coherent for mystics, and mystics were often considered, heretics.
Of course,
insights would go against religion or the popular religion of the time, of their time, or whatever times they lived in. Any theologian, if you look into early Christianity, a theologian is not understood how it is today. It's not a scholarship term. It's not. I don't mean a scholarship. I'm sorry. It's not a scholarly term. It was a term given to anyone, a practicing disciple who was aiming, who practiced these spiritual disciplines found in mysticism. And they were attempting to undergo directly the Holy Spirit, before the Holy Spirit they called theoria. These are the mystics' terms for a direct experience of the absolute, direct experience of God. And I would say a lot. If the more deeply you go into early Christianity, the more you're going to find mysticism associated with it, all the way back to the original Roman Catholic.
One problem that I have is when you're describing, say, like the absolute. You're referencing Plato there, I assume, right? Plato and Aristotle.
Yes, it is a term in philosophy, but yes, Plato referred to it as the good, or Plotinus eventually called it the one.
Right, but that was the one that was described in the context of a polytheistic tradition. So, like, even under that, in order to hold that there's like only one deity, you would need to relabel Platonism or Aristotelian philosophy in order to actually get to where you're going. You need to change it in order to have that function. You're not using Aristotle or Plato. You're kidnapping their concepts and putting a Christian label on them and moving forward with it.
Well, I don't know why you're mentioning polytheism though, because
I'm a polytheist. That's what I do. I'm sorry.
No. Well, the reason I say that is because Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, Plotinus, so forth, they actually criticized, the mainstream religion of the time of Zeus on his offspring. They didn't believe that. They criticized that.
Yes, they did. So here's something that you need to know. There is I want you to look up the will of Aristotle. He has statues built to Zeus, Demeter, and Athena. Upon his death, he funds those projects because of his devotion to those deities. Aristotle was a polytheist.
I would disagree. I believe Aristotle believed with Plotinus.
You disagree with Aristotle, then? You disagree with Aristotle's will?
No, I disagree that he was a polytheist. I believe their understanding of the divine was expressed in what culminated as what Plotinus would call the one. And it was understood as a philosophical absolute. I wouldn't call it polytheistic, though. I would say it's more maybe transtheism is a term that Talmudic used. And then,
my definition of a polytheist is somebody that believes in multiple gods. Aristotle funded this upon his death, funded statues to 3 deities that are in the Greek pantheon. That suggests to me that he was a polytheist. If you have some kind of counter evidence to say that Aristotle dismisses these deities, because I don't think that he ever once says that Zeus isn't real or anything like that. He talks about a prime mover, but he doesn't dismiss the deities.
Evidence. There's a reason why Plotinus called it the one and not the ones.
Actually, hold on a second. Well.
Well,
I'll pull up another source for you real quick. I'm going to read something from...
let's try to wrap it up in just a few minutes here, just so, because I can't arbitrate on this topic too much because we're definitely going outside of my field of expertise, but we do have other people who want to talk about some other interesting topics as well. But it is an interesting discussion. I'll be honest, I've never heard Aristotle described as a polytheist. I've never heard of the will. I'm sorry, we're not talking about. Yeah,
I think you're talking about him being described as. I've never heard him described as a monotheist until I started debating Christians on the topic, but they started bringing him up.
Well, yeah. So when I think of what I understand of a lot of these kind of philosophers that were, in regards to the gods, they had different opinions going all around. Like some of them were agnostic to them. I think some of them, thought of them as stories for sure, but some of them definitely had beliefs and stuff. So it's interesting to see even the various.
A quote from Socrates I want to pull out just real quick. I have altars and shrines, domestic and ancestral, and everything else that the other sort of Athenians have. I think Socrates was a polytheist too.
Well, so could you have statues to something and just acknowledge their cultural?
He's engaging in praxis at that point in time. Atheism is like we see it today, didn't exist at that period of time. The closest you had to it was Epicureanism. Epicureanism was the idea that the gods exist, but they're not necessarily interested in human activity. Socrates didn't seem to be one of those either. But that's about as close as that you got to.
But I could definitely see that.
Atheism as we understand it now.
So again, I don't know for sure, but I could definitely see people. People go to church that don't believe in God as well.
Sure. It's just like in that period of time, we don't know anything about it. If you want to, if you have to assume and relabel the actions and the writings of the people in question. Socrates didn't write anything, but how he's quoted, you would have to relabel what's being discussed regarding him. Jesus didn't write anything either. I wouldn't call him an atheist.
Well, first off, I want to thank Jimmy for calling in and talking about the Trinity and stuff again, because it's something that we were talking about before, and it was a good little.
I appreciate it, man. I just want to say one last thing.
Yeah, go for it.
Go for it.
I study all this myself, and I don't do it from a polytheistic standpoint. I do it from a primitive standpoint. And in my understanding of how Aristotle understood the divine, I would call it panentheistic. I would use, not to be confused with pantheism.
Right. No, I know what panentheism is.
And it's something closer to that. But Paul Tillich suggested transtheism because he felt there was no ordinary understanding of theism or atheism that reflects the God that the Greek philosophers are talking about. And so that's why panentheism was developed. But we may need a neologism. Who knows? We definitely need a better way.
There's not necessarily a contradiction between considering the one a panentheistic entity and polytheism. But I see panentheism has a really interesting history. I'll agree with you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jimmy, thanks again for calling in. That was really awesome, and I can't wait to hear from you again.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Yeah,
see you, dude.
Cool stuff. Yeah, so like that's one of those. It's funny because I love that I have different hosts every week who get to talk about the coolest stuff, and then it's just like I just get to sit back and watch, and I just get to see how the conversation goes, because sometimes it's just out of my field, and I love that. That's cool. I hope like other people who are watching this get to learn this kind of stuff. I'm super interested now in looking into the history of the specific beliefs of like Socrates and Aristotle and Plato now, and saying like their religious beliefs.
I'll send you what I was reading from. There's a guy that's as a friend of mine that is a PhD in philosophy that is also a polytheist. He's a Platonist, and he gets really frustrated with the idea of people considering Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle as being other than polytheist. It doesn't. It's historically it doesn't make very much sense. So I can send you some of the stuff from him. He's a really awesome dude.
There's ancient theologians who say that like Plato and stuff were actually Christian and stuff.
Of course, yeah. No, everybody wants to relabel those guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Cicero too. Cicero gets relabeled a lot as well. Cicero gets relabeled as an atheist when his text just like he talks about different ontologies of deity, and but the way that he talks about defending atheism suggests that he's not an atheist, to put it that way.
Yeah. Historical revisionism happens all the time. So we got lots of callers here. I definitely want to get to all of them. Let's go to Min in California. Hey, Min, can you hear us?
Oh, dude, Min.
Min.
I think I know this guy.
Hello.
Min, what is up?
What's going on, Min?
I'm good, you guys.
Sweet. Min, you've called into the show before.
You called in with Cyrus, right?
Yeah.
Cyrus is my Cyrus and I co-host Hammered Out together. I see you in the chat a lot.
Yeah. So, Min, what did you want to talk to us about today?
Yeah. So today I would love to explore a bit about what we talked before. Specifically, I would love to dive into the area of intuition in epistemology, because I told you before that the reason I don't consider myself very logical person when with certain claims, and the only way that I'm able to resolve it if I have to rely on something like metaphysical narrative to deal with it, and it's not just about my emotion either, but because of the intuitive reasoning that helped me get there. And that's why, and because of that, it led me to believe, like there's something else outside of myself that helped me get there. So I would love to know from you that, do you think that it's possible if I can get the same conclusion if I exercise epistemology and not just rely on story from religion to resolve it? And I will give you the example for that.
Are you talking about, like, because I've defended intuition as an epistemology before, and I think that's what you're doing as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that you can definitely reach different conclusions if you use intuition as an epistemology. That's true. Is that kind of where you're asking, or is there something else that you're asking? Like, I think that I'm not sure are you a Taoist or a Buddhist, or because I remember you're
if I recall.
Okay.
Well,
I remember talking about Taoist philosophy with you a little bit.
Yeah, I am a Buddhist, but I'm leaning towards Taoism more because the Buddhism that I follow is Zen Buddhism, so it leans towards more like
it does
contemplation and intuitive reasoning than the other type of Buddhism, which include worshiping the Buddha, which I don't.
Right.
Yeah,
I think that there's an interesting. I think that I've quoted this at you before, where the Tao Te Ching points out to put that there's a way of worshiping God that it sees as being a negative by putting a head on top of the head you already have, essentially defending the idea of thinking for yourself, which was something that resonated with me when I was looking into Taoism.
Yeah. So before I give my example, I want to hear your response, Dan, because I think like from your perspective, intuition is not a reliable way to determine what is epistemically correct, right?
Yeah, so, again, like any kind of discussions on philosophy, you got to talk about definitions, right? So when we're talking about intuitions, I think if we're talking about the immediate assumptions, right? Like that's what I think of when I think of intuitions, like what gut feelings, right? Like the first things that come to mind, like, yes, if that's what we're talking about, then yes, like intuitions by themselves are not necessarily reliable ways to come to conclusions. Can we train our intuitions to be more reliable? Perhaps. But as a framework by itself, no, yeah.
It's the thing that I think that is interesting about intuitions is but the structure that I approach to it with is intuition can give you reason to posit something, and then you can logically explore it.
Sure.
And I think that's the approach that Cicero describes with respect to deity. And I think that it's a similar approach winds up being used for Buddhism and Taoism, even though I don't think that Taoism necessarily describes that process, but I think it's a process that is used in a lot of philosophies. I think that intuition winds up being used, intuition and experience combined, while you can get God arguments out of it. It's also the set of arguments that we use in order to get to things like physical world. So while deity doesn't have like that verificationism backup I guess physical world doesn't even have that, but when you get into scientific claims about how the world works, whatever it is, then you get a strong epistemology out of that. With deity discussions or with spirituality discussions, you wind up having to have a logical check system, where you can posit something through your experiences and through intuition, but just asserting that they're true on that basis, that's not a good idea. But using that as a beginning step to posit an idea and then see what the logical conclusions are and the logical fallout of it, that's a process that I think that a lot of the best ideas are founded on. And that's where we get the philosophical underpinnings of science, and it's where we get the philosophical underpinnings of a polytheistic structure or even atheistic structure.
Yeah, so when I talk about the intuition, I'm talking about, the example I can give. I guess it's probably a really poor example, but you get the idea. Like when Archimedes found the law of density in the bathtub, he just took a bath, right? And then somehow when he just enjoyed his moment and he saw the thing flowing on the water, and he say, I understand it now. And then he came up with the law of density based on that. So he did it. I don't know, like maybe his subconscious mind work it out somehow, but in that moment, it's
so harmonized. Can I relate that to the example that I gave? Because I think I agree with you that that's an intuition-based that's an intuition-based positing. So when he's sitting in the bathtub, he posits something based on the intuition of his experience, and then he checks it.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's a great point that Ocean's making. Like, we're making the distinction that there's the posit first. Like, I could see a math equation and I could just guess at the number. My intuition says the answer is going to be 27, but I won't ever know that's true until I do actually go through the math myself, even though, those intuitions might be there.
Correct.
Yeah, Dan. I'll give you the example that I went through now. And the reason I want to bring up intuition in this discussion, because the intuition I have, it never appear in something that require like scientific fact or empirical evidence. It's always appear when it's dealing with critical issue about ethics or meaning of life or something that's crucial in human existential awareness. But it never relates to anything like scientific. So that's why I rely it more than, logical reasoning to deal with it.
Well, that's the underpinnings of spiritual discussions in general, I think.
Yeah. So the example I want to give you relate to the topic of abortion that I brought up on last time. So I had a friend who decided to have an abortion, and at that time, I was a vegetarian. I just became one. So I became a vegetarian out of my ethical decision. So I did not support her decision to get the abortion. She knew that. And I came around that issue not because of, all the logical discussion about it, but because I read a story from Zen Buddhist koan. So the story is like this. There are two, and I'm pretty sure you can Google it. It's a pretty popular story. So there are two monks when they walked by a river and they saw a lady, a woman who struggled to get through the river because the water is cold. So the senior monk picked up the woman and carried her to the other side. And then they carry on their journey back to the monastery. So the novice monk told the senior monk that, according to the rule of our temple, we could not touch somebody of opposite gender. Why would you do that? And then the senior monk said, well, I dropped her hours ago before we come back to the temple. So why do you still carry her here? So the story just go like that. And then, I read it and then it sit in my mind, but I didn't have to think too much. So one day when I sit on a lake and I just enjoy, the day off, and then I saw a few people like play around the water, and then there was this guy who carried his girlfriend on his back, and then he jumped into the water. I don't know, somehow that image triggered my memory of the story, and then immediately I understand the meaning of that lesson in the story, that sometimes I have to be willing to violate my conviction if I want to be a compassionate person, and I have to focus on the moment that who is in need of my help, and instead of making judgment and stay rigid in my own way. And right there, so after I get that, I make a phone call to my friend. I said, I would drive you to the clinic so you can have somebody with you there when you have to go through the procedure, and then I will drive you home.
Wow.
And so, then if you come with all the, logic that I listened from Matt debate with Christine about abortion, his logic is awesome. There's no flaw in it. But that's not the reason I go pro-choice. I go pro-choice because I was able to reconcile my struggle with my conviction as a vegetarian and the compassion I have for my friend from Harvard, that I have tried to understand her, struggle, why she had to make that decision. And the story in that parable helped me deal with it. Therefore, I rely a lot on that sort of gut instinct to get where I need to be. So that's why I want to ask you, do you think that I will be able to get the same conclusion if you do epistemology on me, Anthony?
Maybe so, but first of all, I gotta say, thank you for telling that story.
That's a really awesome story.
That's a wonderful story, and I'll tell you this: when really thinking about, abortion wasn't a big deal to me growing up. It wasn't really something I really thought about too often. I didn't really have too much of an opinion on it. But I do remember when somebody framed it to me in the sense of, would I ever force someone to give birth against their will? And that's like a poignant question that stuck out in my mind, among other things. And although, we could talk about the logic behind it all day. We could talk about what framework we're using. But I am of the opinion that if we're even to discuss ethics, that human emotions do play a part in that. It's part of why we do the things that we do. And so in that sense, human, to completely deny that would make an ethical system that wouldn't make sense to humans, that wouldn't serve us in any way. We create our ethical system so that, one, we can feel better about ourselves, so that we can organize ourselves, to bring ourselves to proper action, or at least how we understand that term, right? So I don't dismiss that you should have a completely logical, completely emotionless conclusion to your reasons of why you should choose to be pro-choice or not. I do think emotions play a part in it, but I do think like we do have to measure like how logical or the reasons, at least the reasons behind our emotions, because we do have reasons as to why we feel the way that we do. Some of them we might find are better reasons than others, right? And so in your particular moment, like you found compassion for another human being because I think you were put into a specific situation where it became more than just a thought experiment for you. It became someone that you know. And you find that, especially even with politicians who have changed their minds when it comes to things like, well, I just found out my daughter is gay. Maybe we should, suddenly their minds change about how they feel about gay marriage and those policies and stuff like that. And that's like, I think that's natural. And I
see that happen with like Dick Cheney.
Yeah, that happened with, I'm referencing Dick Cheney in particular, but like I'm saying one, I think that's okay. Like I don't think that anybody should just, if they find that that's happening to them, as long as you're acknowledging what's happening, like, yeah, like you're a human being. That's how we process things. Like that's how we live our lives. Like that cone is useful for you in that moment. And I'm glad that it was because, you found something. You found a conclusion that you might otherwise have. Now, if I had questioned you in a street epistemology way, I don't know. Maybe you could have got another conclusion, but I can't. I won't know until I actually do that with you, right? So I don't know. What are your thoughts about this, Ocean?
I think that a lot of like our moral systems or ethical structures, or however it is you want to word it, a lot of them are trying to make our moral intuitions make sense, and it's kind of interesting because like the way that we sort of check moral systems that we've built is to see if it's in line with our moral intuitions.
Yeah, that's so true. So true.
It because our moral intuitions we're taking axiomatically, whether we really admit it or not. We're not holding moral positions necessarily because of the logic behind them. Our logical moral systems seem to be trying to make those intuitions into a system. Honestly, it seems like sometimes that it doesn't quite work into a system. There's several different ways of looking at morality. You can look at cultural relativism. You can look at different forms of objective morality or absolute morality or subjective morality, or go into particularism. Suris and I have had a lot of different conversations over how you would wind up checking yourself on morality without getting into a situation in which you're question begging against your tuitions. You're question begging, right?
You're checking yourself before wrecking yourself. I'm sorry.
Right. But if you're trying to check your moral system, you're not going to be able to use anything other than your moral intuitions to really check it. And this gets into something that Christians will sometimes bring up, of like that in order to check it, you need to check it against Scripture. Well, that gets into all kinds of situations because we have stuff like Euthyphro Dilemma. So, this is one of the like morality. The more that I've like looked into it, as far as like trying to build logical systems out of it, the more I look into it, the less that I feel that I know about it. But the more interesting it is, the more that I explore it, and I think that's some really cool stuff.
Yeah, I feel less confident in my ethical systems. I mean, I've definitely made shifts since I've left Christianity in particular, right? Because like that has its own kind of ideas and stuff. And I feel like I'm changing my mind about stuff all the time because I'm getting all kinds of different reasons for different things. So, yeah.
Dan, the reason I rarely question my intuition is that because when I read about history of religion, usually the founder of a specific religion, they tend to get some sort of insight just by like a really spontaneous moment when they see something, maybe just really mundane to us, but somehow that incident triggered their thinking and they change the way they see things. Just like when the Buddha saw the stream like flow the bowl of milk, and then somehow he understand the way of living, and then he quit the austerity way of living and live more like a middle way before he got enlightened. And I think that's why like when I get something like that, it can be really impact my being like to the core. Therefore, I rarely ever using empirical evidence to check it, because I feel like that means I feel like I allow logic to dominate. I allow analytical thinking to dominate the intuitive thinking. And those things exist in a human mind simultaneously, right? So, I am skeptical with certain things, but I'm rely on my intuition and other things. Usually, they never cross.
I have an agreement and a disagreement.
I don't want to question.
I have an agreement and a disagreement with you. One is that I think that when you're talking about empirical evidence and trying to examine morality, it gets really interesting trying to have that conversation because it doesn't work too well. And for reasons that we've wound up historically seeing as being very frustrating, but true. The other thing that I would say is, as far as intuitions, I still hold the value of questioning your intuitions, even like maybe not in the moment of trying to make a moral decision and that like where time matters at that time, then you need to, there's times where you need to trust that gut instinct or you trust that moral intuition or intuition about other things. Sometimes it's, but in those moments, sometimes that intuition leads you to the right decision. Sometimes that intuition leads you to a consequence that you were not intending in any way whatsoever. So intuitions aren't infallible. It's hard to explain exactly what they are, but it is one of the tools that we have for being able to like explore reality or have morality discussions. But I do think that intuitions, you should not believe something because it's intuitive alone. You should be questioning. You should be checking your intuitions.
Should never be the be all end all. I totally agree with that.
Correct.
Sure. Well, Min, go on real quick. Let's wrap it up just real quick. Yeah,
I just want to say one thing. I think I guess from me, because the intuition only come up, dealing with something like human relationship and stuff. So I never resort to logic to resolve it, first of all. And when in the moment when I recognize that, what the right thing to do to somebody, and always it's always a good thing, it's never a bad thing. All the doubt just go away. I mean, I don't have any doubt about that. Now, of course, if you make, if I hear the claim, like this stone can heal your disease, something like that, immediately I feel, I don't believe this. I have to check this first.
Yeah.
But when it's something like, I understand now, this is something I have to do for somebody, or this is the path I have to take to, I have to follow my heart for something. Like the doubt is never there. I don't know why, but I mean that's just the way I am, I guess.
No, I think that's most people.
Say something about. Sorry.
Go ahead, Ocean.
Okay. I was like, do you want to go? Do you want to? The Tao Te Ching. It's been a while since I've read it, but one of the things that I think that it does is it fosters intuitions and also trains you to have intuitions that may not be intuitive, as odd as that sounds. So if I'm recalling from the Tao Te Ching, so I might not quote this exactly right, but one of the earlier passages in it is talking about how you're looking at a water pot, and that the part of the pot that is actually useful is the part that isn't there at all. It's the interior of it, which isn't an intuitive concept, but it's something that starts to train your intuitions. It's an observation that makes you have certain intuitions when approaching different, like it makes you think in that context. It starts to put your mind into a framework in which its intuitions start being guided into that kind of direction where you start to notice things like that. Does that make sense? Or do you feel that it does the same thing for you?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that's something like that's why, I something I had to work on, because everything that I deal with in this life that have some kind of, abstract meaning, I never be able to get it there by thought experiment or, empirical evidence or like some kind of logical reasoning. It never works. I don't know why, but it seems like it only works if I just let it go and just don't think about it. And when it's the moment comes, immediately I understand what it is and I go with it. I never doubt. maybe it's not a good way of living, but it worked for me so far. So that's why I rely on it a lot.
Well, it's something we could definitely examine more. Unfortunately,
we could spend like 3 shows on this.
But man, dude, last time I said, dude, call again, and you did, and that just makes me so happy. I'm so glad that you called again, man. You're officially my favorite Buddhist caller. Because nobody else has identified as such, and you'll remain in that spot until you get competition. So thank you for calling in. You are awesome.
Thanks, man. It's always awesome having a conversation with you, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Ocean.
Yeah, we'll talk to you later. Man. Okay, how many other shows at the Atheist Community of Austin do you get to hear Buddhists read koans to you? Huh? Where you at, Matt? Come on.
Fucking sweet.
Best show right here. Truth Wanted. Come at me. It's so good. Perennialists, pagans, Buddhists. Oh my, we get them all, baby. It's everywhere. All right, let's go ahead and go. We got 3 more callers here. I want to get to all 3 of you guys before we leave, and if Ocean is willing to talk to you. So I want to go next to Mark.
No, I'm good.
He's peace now. Mark in Indiana, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up, brother?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Doing all right?
What's up?
Going good, man. How can we help you today?
All right. Well, you guys were talking earlier about how kind of alternate histories were really interesting to talk about. I had this thought experiment a while back on so many of our courthouses here in America have some sort of display of the 10 Commandments somewhere on their premises. And that's supposed to be like our guiding light for justice or something like that.
They sure do. Do.
It needs to be Hammurabi's law.
I
agree.
Only a few of those 10 Commandments are actually punishable in a court of law. So my little thought experiment was, what if all 10 Commandments were actually punishable in a court of law? What would that look like in our judicial system?
Matt just came into the room real quick and gave me a very intimidating look. I think he wants to actually fight me now. So that's going to happen. That's
is he saying Hammurabi's code is just not a good thing to put in front of a courthouse?
I think it's because what I said earlier. That's a Patreon goal, is me fighting Matt live on For Truth. He's ready. He's watching me now. He's not going to let me leave the building. This is... I made a mistake. I made a huge mistake.
What'd you say? Now I want to know.
I said that Truth Wanted is the best thing.
Oh, I see. All right. There's going to be
gave me a thumbs up. All right, so he's good.
Okay.
He's good.
All right.
Okay. oh shit. There it is. All right, there's a thumbs up.
Empirical proof.
Yeah. You just have to trust that that's actually Matt, I guess, because he didn't show up all the way on camera. It is him. He's just... Yeah, now he's rolling his eyes. Okay, we need to move on. So yes, we're talking about
press H in the chat if you want to see Dan and Matt Dillahunty fight live on air right now.
There we go,
man. Yeah, so definitely adultery. Don't know how you. I mean, like, yeah. What are the? I mean, murder. That's one you could like probably try for, right? Coveting your neighbor's wife. Don't know how you'd prove that in court. You know,
yeah, that would be one of the harder
coveting,
ones.
Yeah, just the desire. Also, the chat is full of H's.
Yeah, my thought experiment was on two different scenarios. One is, what if these laws were punishable in a court of law from the founding of America? What would our Bill of Rights look like? Would have looked like.
The First Amendment would be screwed. I'd be put to death somewhere.
Yes. Yeah. The second scenario was, what if such laws were enacted nationwide tomorrow? What would America look like then?
This is definitely a thought experiment that just definitely winds up with a lot of executions.
Yeah, Ocean will be chopped up like 50 different ways for sure.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know. It's like, and I think that a lot of atheists would too, as a result, like this. Although, wait a minute. I guess you shall have no other God before me. I guess atheists don't put any other God before. So you guys are fine.
We put the world before, Like they would say something.
But that's
like,
okay. Yeah, they're idolaters.
Yeah. You know.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you're done. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, so it would be a hellhole. I don't know.
Atheists just worship money.
That's right. Yeah.
So here was my so like for the first commandment, my thought experiment was if that had been enacted at the founding of America, we would be primarily Lutheran, I would think, or Puritan. I think those were the two major Christian religions back in the late 17th century, I think. I know it wasn't Catholicism.
Certainly. No, there was a few different forms of Protestantism that were kicking around in the late 1700s.
Right. But so if you take that literally, no other God before me, which religion and which version of their God would fit the bill?
We can solve this. Hold on. I'll flip a coin. I missed, but we're going to say it's heads. So I guess we're going with the Baptist God. All right.
Woohoo.
Any Protestant faith that can get along with the Baptist God is totally fine. The rest of you, I guess, will have to. The gallows are.
Yeah. So count out all the witches.
That winds up being kind of the approach to those kind of things. Is that and some denominations, I'm sure, could get on board because Protestant deity isn't very different, but Christians will take little disagreements very seriously sometimes, and wind up fighting over it for.
Yeah.
So denominations are split all the time over.
What I would imagine, Mark, is we would have a Supreme Court whose only job would be to find the jurisprudence of previous rulings of how the Ten Commandments were done in previous cases, and would use that to determine, future laws in this country. It would all be based on that, and it would be terrible. It would be, nobody would like that. That's why it doesn't actually work like that, even though everybody thinks it does. And if it did, actually, it would be not great. And we wouldn't have this show. It would actually be banned. Like, it would not be legal in a society that operated under those kinds of laws. So I'm glad that we don't live in that world.
Exactly. Well, I'm glad we don't, too. But, you were talking about this earlier on...
our population would go down significantly. Yeah. That's one of the effects that we...
Sure.
I think some other laws that would be associated with those is that America would have like blasphemy laws. But then again,
correct. Yeah, freedom of speech wouldn't be the biggest value in the world.
Which religion would that count for? Because I don't see.
I'm sorry, Mark.
You okay?
I have to interrupt you because a call has appeared on my call screen that says Matt Dillahunty calling from inside the building in all caps. Says, I've got some thoughts on your epistemology, and I don't know if I want to take that right now.
What's going on? What's about to happen?
I saw him step outside with his cell phone. I don't. This is very scary. I'm actually very scared.
Wait, hold on a second. Then it's not from inside the building, is it?
That's true. I think. Well,
that is a lie.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know if I'd accept that.
Listen, step out.
I don't.
Is he calling you out?
Look, I did start this. I don't know if he's talking about me or you, though, Ocean. That's what.
Right, I know. That's what I'm wondering. Is like, do we need to have like because he can just come in if he wants to fight with you? But
that's true. Look,
I'm remote.
I know Matt's listening. Matt, if you want to fight Ocean, do it on your show, okay? Like, don't start beef with my guests, please. But okay, he hung up. All right, I guess. This is fun. Mark, I'm so sorry. We're really interrupting.
I don't know who's gonna need to have words with Matt later. Is it gonna be me next time I'm in Texas, or is it gonna be you when we walk out the door, or is it both? I don't know. It'll be interesting.
It's I don't know, but we're all just having a good time here. That just made my night. Yeah. So Mark,
hey, isn't it great though? Isn't it great though being atheists that we can disagree with each other without actually fighting?
Yeah, I mean, like,
I'm not an atheist.
I was gonna say, yeah, this guy, but Matt's he's looking at me funny now. I gotta finish this call. Let me talk to my man Mark here.
Isn't Matt like just pacing out there? Okay. Anyway.
He's just looking at me. He's disappointed. I can tell. But
we love you, Matt. Come on, man.
Yeah. So Mark, long story short, bad idea. 10 Commandments. Let's not do them. So, I like what we're doing now.
And there would be just a lot of negative effects. I don't know.
A lot of negative stuff, right?
Yeah.
For sure. Anything else you want to say, Mark, before we kind of wrap this call up?
No, I know you guys are running short on time. I just wanted to throw that out there, what kind of thoughts you'd have on it, and think it's some fun to think about, at least, if not but slightly horrifying.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks again for calling for that, Mark. It's a good idea to think about once, and then we don't have to think about it ever again, because it really isn't a good idea now that I'm talking out loud. So, yeah, thanks for calling. Hope to hear from you again. Man, oh, man. A lot of laughs tonight. Really good show. I'm loving it.
I'm getting Dan in trouble today, guys.
Dude, for sure. But you know what? It's worth it. It's fun, man. Like, it's fun to, like, just... I don't know, just to be here, just to be in the moment with other people that you enjoy. Like that's the best thing about this show, honestly, is the different perspectives and people I get to talk to with every.
Absolutely.
It's so cool. Like I am so thankful for you guys, the guys who watch the show and who get to call and I get to talk to and say that you watch me. Like that's crazy to me. Like I don't think I'm nearly that interesting, but obviously you're not just watching for me, you're watching for people like Ocean, you're watching for other folks to come on. It warms my heart. So thanks again, all you guys who watch and support the show.
Absolutely.
I want to go to our next call here. Let's go to John in Missouri. John, what is up?
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
What's up, John?
Going all right.
Cool. What did you want to talk about today?
So I want to talk about faith in science, and more specifically, like softer sciences.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a very negative experience with a number of mental health professionals. And I find it crazy that someone can read a book and then based on reading that book have a better opinion on what my needs are than myself.
Well, okay, so before we keep going
I definitely want to hear specifics on this.
Yes, because if we're talking about people who train to work with mental health, like they do other things besides reading the books. Like they do actually, interact with people and like.
I think he might be referencing the Bible.
Maybe so. Yeah, let's.
But I agree with you. There's several books that people that are.
Let's not jump into it too quick, John. I'll definitely let you finish yourself out.
So I mean, just that any human being, like. I was in a very unhappy situation, like I was unsatisfied with my job, unsatisfied with my marriage. Mm-hmm. And the solution to that problem was medication based on his medical training. Mm-hmm. And because of his medical training, my opinion didn't matter anymore because I was so upset by my situation that my opinion of myself didn't matter anymore. And like he had 100% certainty that my opinions were invalid and that medication could fix my problems. Like just complete blind faith that he was more correct about me than I was. And that was a very disheartening situation.
Yeah, that's tough. I'm sorry.
It's definitely tough, man.
I'm sorry that happened to you. It's hard enough in this country to talk about mental illness without bringing up the stigmas and stuff. And like one of those conversations that we have is, well, like what is the necessary amount of medicine that we need to take when it comes to this? Like how necessary is this stuff? Like what? Are we supposed to be taking this as much as we think? Is it actually helping us all positively? And there's a lot of debate about that, even still to this day, because of people's individual experiences with this stuff. And
I don't know the particulars of your situation, but I agree with Dan. There's definitely a lot of debate on these kind of topics. But and I'm not a mental health professional at all. But what I would ask is what would you have preferred out of the experience that you went through? What was the action that you were looking for?
Good question.
I mean, I was just looking for a divorce, and like I was trying to have a very civil conversation about it, and like the reaction to that was just like, oh, you're being abusive, you're just threatening me. And it's like, no, I'm trying to have a conversation with you about how I feel and what I'm thinking. And that ended up with like me being sent to this hospital. And it's just like, I basically have spent my entire life afraid of being sent to one of these places. And then it happened, because it's just like, my mother specifically was like very devoutly Christian. It's just like, I felt like if she found out I was an atheist, or like if I ever let her know that like I was like angry and upset with her for like sending me to this place, that like they'd medicate me. And it's like, I just don't like the way I'm being treated. I just feel like we have like this blind faith that these medicines definitely 100% work, and like maybe they do, and maybe they help lots of people, and maybe I'm a fringe case. But like, if we apply like really, really honest skepticism to these studies, it's just like the company makes a drug, the company does a study, they have a financial incentive for the study to say that the drug is useful, and then it does, and then they profit. Like,
well,
here's what
I'll say.
Go ahead.
Here's what I'll say. There is no such thing as a drug without some sort of side effect, whether it be big or small, right? I think.
I'm also not aware of a drug that has a 100% success rate.
Yeah, anything we take is
especially
going
in mental health.
Yeah, and there's never going to be a case where if you give a drug to the entire human population, that it's going to work exactly the same with everybody. Are there drugs that work really well and work almost the same way with a lot of kinds of people? Sure. And again, like, this is going into the debate that we're having right now in this country, as far as like, how much should we rely on medication as a solution, as opposed to therapy, as opposed to exercise, as opposed to, all of these other things? Is it a combination of these things? What should we value more than the other? I'll certainly say that I don't think medication is the be-all, end-all. And I'm sorry that maybe that was the impression that somebody gave you based on their expertise. Maybe they viewed you a bit coldly and didn't value your personal experiences with that, and for that I'm truly sorry that's what ended up happening with your situation. I'm glad that we have the options for second opinions in this country, and maybe that's what needs to happen with your situation. I don't know. I can't. This is really outside of my scope of field as far as what kind of medical advice I could give you, and I certainly wouldn't want to be the person to give you that. But I will say that at least when you're calling into this show, you'll definitely hear empathy from the both of us, because I don't think that there is one solution for these kinds of things. I think it's probably going to be a combination of things. I think it's probably going to be something that we're always going to have to keep researching. So
yeah,
I definitely have agreement with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure.
I just feel like there's lots of doctors out there that are 100% sure that they have the answer.
Sure.
And like, once you're in that situation where you're under the care of one of those types of people, you're just completely helpless. And like, I probably could have benefited from like seeking out care like earlier, but knowing that people like the doctor I ended up with existed, like, I have been terrified to ever seek any kind of help.
So now there's a fear of even reaching out at this point.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Like, I've seen 5 different professionals, and not a single one of them, like, I feel like if any of them listened to me, I feel like any of them should have been like, yeah, you probably should get a divorce. Like, you're obviously very unhappy in this situation. And it's just like, it's just mind blowing. Like, how it's just the thing that helped me the most was just getting away and starting over.
Yeah. You know, I like the perspective of a divorce is something to be celebrated because it's the end of an unhappy marriage or a marriage that wasn't working, you know. It's an interesting perspective. Unfortunately, we live in a culture that doesn't really look too kindly on divorces, although that's kind of changing now because, I don't know, growing up, half of my friends' parents were divorced. You know, it's much more normalized now. But I think it is a solution. I think divorce is a solution for a lot of problems.
There's a friend of mine that he told me that he was getting a divorce a little while ago. And I said, I'm sorry to hear that, man. And he said, I'm not.
Yeah. Right. Of course, I've never been divorced. I've never been married. So, you know, I am only limited in those experiences. But I hear similar things. You know, it's like, oh, yeah, you get to move on with your life. You get to have that choice, that option. And that's healthy, I think. So.
Well, I just want to say really quickly, you're worth waiting to talk to, but like, I'm very impressed at the queue now. The first time I called it, I just got it right away many months ago. So keep up the good work, Dan.
Thanks.
I appreciate what
Dan's got a really awesome show going, man. So
I'm trying. I start beef with people though, and that's the problem. I'm gonna get killed because of it. But anyway,
I really appreciate you calling in, John. Thank you.
Yes, John. Thanks. I mean, that was. I'm really glad you felt comfortable sharing that with us, and I'm glad I could be at least some help with you. So, good luck to you.
I do apologize if it's like really off topic. It's just.
Hey, you know what?
Sometimes,
dude, you need to talk about this kind of stuff, man. And if we can be a source for that, then like that's cool. I'm doing something good. So
honestly, if this call gets more people talking about this subject, fantastic.
Matt's saying he doesn't have beef with me. He's all smiles, so you know it's all good. I'm just joking, Matt. It's all good. We
I mean, that's what old men say when they challenge young men to physical confrontations, isn't it, Dan?
To be fair, I think. Damn. I'm the one creating this narrative.
There's going to be a fight happening now. John, you're not helping, man.
Matt doesn't have access to the mic. I have complete control of the narrative being spun right now, so that's what. Oh shit!
I mean,
he's coming in the door.
I can hear him right now. I don't know if it's that.
Look out!
I have access to everything.
I feel like Dan versus Matt Dillahunty at the Bat Cruise would be a big draw, right?
We need to get out of here.
Yes.
This place isn't safe anymore. Yes, John. Thanks again for calling. Yeah, appreciate it, man. And I look forward to hearing from you again. Take care.
Goodbye.
Yeah, thanks for calling, John.
Again,
you okay over there?
He's stretching. He's getting ready. He's doing some taekwondo back there. He's doing flips. Oh my goodness. He just broke like 7 slabs of wood. I didn't
realize Matt knew capoeira.
Oh my gosh. That's 3 whole concrete? Man, amazing. He's doing all kinds of acrobatics. This is like Power Rangers out here right now. It's crazy. But yeah.
It's gonna go Super Sentai on you.
Super Sentai on me. No, but you know what? That was even though that was a bit, that was like totally not usually what we talk about here. I'm glad we had that conversation.
Absolutely, man.
That's fun. You know, like it's not fun. I'm sorry. What I mean by fun is it's
a good conversation.
It's a good conversation. It's a change of pace from what we talk about. And there is we do trust the experts in our country, the ones that we go see to for medical problems, to like make the right diagnosis with us. And like people make mistakes, you know, like, and that's something. And I can't make any particular judgments about his situation. I don't know his doctor. I don't know what he told him, but you know, it does happen. Like it's. You know, something to think about.
There's a thing that is kind of interesting about that with what he was saying with respect to kind of like the financial incentive in the drug industry, and like there's also a lot of conspiracy talk about the medical industry with respect to that. Some of it's, I think, justified, some of it's not. But the fact that some of it is, and that even if you take the position that none of it is, the fact.
When will it end? Oh my God. You can't hear this if you're listening to this, but we just switched to a camera shot of Matt pointing at the camera in the other room.
But what I was saying was important, damn it. But the fact that some of it is, as it creates a legitimate conversation with respect to like your financial incentives to put out a bad drug.
Yeah.
It's present in our society. It's a conversation that we need to have. I don't know exactly what the solution is, but I think that it's something that in our elections isn't talked about anywhere near enough.
Yeah. Oh, we need to have conversations about big pharma and like, you know, what's real and what's not about that kind of stuff. That'd be a fun episode to do. But I do want to try to wrap things up. We have one more call on the line that I want to get to, who has been waiting patiently. This is Murder Man Texas from Texas.
Murder Man.
What is up?
What's going on, Murder Man?
Not so much. I wanted to talk about something y'all talked about early on in the show. So earlier in the show, y'all both talked about questioning why people feel the need to convert or deconvert others to their beliefs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I actually do this. And so I wanted to offer like my personal explanation for why I do and see if you guys have problems with it. You can poke and prod it, whatever. For me, there's like a psychological value appeal that's happening personally that causes me to do that. So like after thousands of hours of like personal reflection of my own behavior throughout my entire life, I've come up with what my core values are. And unwillingly, I came from an ultimate core starting value of truth when I was younger. And I originally used this value to label others as either logical or illogical. And I would then use truth to deny all subjective value and fell into a spiral of nihilism. But as I grew older and reflected upon my actions and beliefs, I realized that I was actually a hypocrite the entire time, because what was actually happening is I was deeply in love with truth itself. So this realization caused me to embrace what was my auxiliary core value of love. And once that love was brought in, empathy formed, and I began the work of developing my own personal morality. This really helped me escape nihilism as an atheist. The reason I bring up this highly paraphrased story is that all of my actions and communications with others are ultimately traced back to these core values. When I try to speak to others, my attempts to uproot their beliefs or express my own beliefs are expressions of love for my love for truth that I'm trying to give to others by either telling them that they're wrong because of X reason, or telling them that they're right, and this is why I agree with them, whatever it may be, that's why. And this is okay, in my opinion, because I love being proven wrong by other people. I absolutely love it. I long for it. Destroy me. And then I will adjust my truth to be closer to what I believe reality is.
I think that there's a subtle difference between what I'm against and what you're talking about. So I think that I also think there's a difference between if somebody expresses that they're of one faith or another, and then the response to that is, well, I need to turn you into an atheist, like immediately. That kind of thing tends to be what I'm more against. What you're talking about seems to be just the approach of having difficult conversations with people who want to have difficult conversations. And that's totally fine. I think that that's something that we should be doing more of. The idea that politics and religion is a conversation, or conversations that we shouldn't have, is something that I've never understood. Like people tried to ingrain that in me when I was younger, so I would keep bringing this shit up, and it never stuck. I was just like, why? It's important.
Yeah,
we should have these conversations.
Yeah, it's interesting because like we have this idea that we should have a right to respect people to not engage in difficult conversations, right? Respect their right to not engage, maybe. And that's kind of been changing a lot, especially in recent years, as we've been having kind of more and more difficult conversations about all kinds of stuff. I mean, there's a giant list of things, but
on this show,
even, right? But like as the growth of the internet, as the growth of communication technology, we have more time to talk about things more, and we explore more things, and so those topics keep coming up, and so I guess where I'm going with this is, yeah, I would agree with Ocean in the sense that we might be talking about different things, because I think most people want to believe, well, actually, I might not know if most people want to believe in true things. I think people believe they already have an idea of what's true already, and that's why, you know, they think that everybody should think like them. But, you know, everybody might not approach it in the same way. Like, your desire to be proven wrong, your desire to know what's true is unfortunately, you know, not as common as what we would like it to be. And even then, it could still be misguided. I know that, you know, my desire for truth is probably misguided in some ways that I can't even, you know, comprehend, because I'm not even there. And so when we start to think of ourselves as, oh, I have to know, because like then you kind of create this self-fulfilling, like, I want to know when I'm wrong, so I must be right. You know what I mean? Because I haven't been proven wrong about this thing yet. You know, like that can kind of develop into a habit too. And maybe that kind of fuels into what Ocean's talking about, but I don't know.
No, I agree with a lot of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Try to knowledge in general from a framework of epistemic humility. Because if you think about, I mean, this is the way I've had memory, like in the brain level, explained to me, and how it works is that when the first time you remember something, you remember the actual thing or the event. But each subsequent time that you remember, you recall that memory, you're actually remembering yourself remembering. And that comes with a lot of baggage. And in each time you're doing that, you can even like create a delusion.
Yes.
So for me, what I'm doing is I want to approach, because I know that, and that's the way it works, I want to try and approach things with humility. And I try not, at the end of the day, I know that ultimately my perspective, no matter how many checks and balances I put on it, is going to be biased. So I need to be ready to get rid of it.
Yeah.
If there's evidence against it.
There's a story I want to talk about this thing I read one time about a study that was done, and I believe this was the parameters. The idea was people were being asked about their memories of going to Disney World, but how they set it up was they were doing it in a room with a bunch of Disney advertisements and Disney things, but they also included Looney Tunes characters in there, like Bugs Bunny, like a Bugs Bunny stand-in or something, like at Disney World and stuff, right? So like obviously there's no Looney Tunes characters at Disney World, but they kind of created this environment where, you know, that was the case. And when they were asking questions about like, what do you remember about Disney World, they were asked like, do you remember seeing like Bugs Bunny at Disney World or something? And something like 10% of the people who were answering said yes, they do remember seeing like Bugs Bunny at Disney World. But there's just no way that could be true, because like that's not a property owned by Disney. And so like you can actually create kind of these false memories just by the environments that you're trying to remember stuff in.
Some of those people might be saying that they remember it when they don't. The people are afraid of being wrong. Yeah. It's something that I've discovered, especially in this scene when you have debates with people, is that like people are really, really afraid of, even if they're obviously losing a debate, they'll stand strong. Because they don't want to be slighted.
Yeah.
They don't want to feel like they've lost. They don't want to let people know that they realize that there was a loss. For some reason that adds to it. When honestly, for me, and I think that Murder Man feels very much the same way, I'm more interested in conversations like this of being like, no, I actually don't know the answer to that question. Can you help me out? Or do you have information? Does the person that I'm talking to know more than me on this certain subject? Can you provide me with your resources and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Because debate culture can be toxic. It can be kind of cutthroat.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not an environment that's conducive for learning. Like it's an environment that's conducive for blood sports. I mean, like it's entertainment.
Debate is gladiatorial.
Yeah,
absolutely is.
And I'm not interested in that. I'm really not. I think I was at a
time. I mean, I am, but it's like, I've got a thing on it because, you know, like I think in a debate, like it's a really awesome kind of chess game, and there's a gladiatorial aspect of it, and there are positives to that. There are things to be learned from that when it comes to having difficult conversations, because the conversation tactics that are used in a debate are useful to know if you're going to be learning things as well, and if you're going to be convincing people. But at the same time, there is an element of it that becomes a competition that isn't for the two people speaking to learn truth, and on top of that can provide an illusion of legitimacy to people that are actually debating. Like when you have somebody that's holding a batshit position that is debating somebody, like say the anti-vax position. Let's take something that you and I think is just fucking obvious.
Yeah.
If you have two people that are debating the vaccination conversation, you have to set up an environment in which the person who is pro-vaccination is on equal time and equal playing field with the person who is against vaccination.
Yeah.
And there are consequences to that. There just are.
Yeah.
As much as the result of that should be the person who is right winning, the thing is the person who is wrong might have better tactics.
Yeah.
Straight up.
That's true.
Or the person who's right might not even be aware of the data points that support their position and are just bad at arguing. I've seen that happen a number of times.
Yeah.
Where if you have somebody who's like defending evolution versus a creationist, sometimes the creationist is just the better debater, and the person defending evolution just doesn't understand evolution very well and thinks that debating creationists is easy. It's not.
Yeah. Or they're trying to take apart claims that they're not even making, because
right, exactly.
It's
like when your tactics are bad.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to kind of end on, because I know you guys are probably short on time, is that while questioning the reason why people feel the need to convert and deconvert others, I think it's really important to understand that there's like a valid, actual reason to do that questioning that is a more global human explanation for people's behavior that can span across all beliefs, faiths, cultures, and traditions. And that so like you don't necessarily need to dismiss someone outright just for trying to deconvert someone else, and that you through questioning and dialogue you can expose what people's core values are, so you can understand what they're trying to do when they engage in the discussion.
Yeah, and that's a separate thing to consider too. Like, when is it, what is the line where we need to have that conversation? I got a coworker who believes that crystals have energy, I mean, that doesn't affect my life in any way. I don't think she's buying any crystals or really spending any money on it. It's just something she believes. Is it worth talking about? Is it worth deconstructing?
It becomes worth talking about it when they're saying that they want to cure something with it.
Sure.
Like, this is something that, like, I've gotten into a couple of situations in the pagan community with my opinions on people that talk about healing crystals, because every once in a while, among pagans, you have people that believe this shit. And I have an issue.
I'm sorry. When you said pagans and believe this shit, I thought you were talking about your own shit. Like you were just making a meta joke there. But
I'm talking about pagans that believe that they're going to pick up a piece of amethyst and cure their own cancer or some shit.
Yeah.
That's the part. That's the kind of thing is when you're taking a position that is in direct opposition to empirical evidence. That's where I'm going to start getting annoyed with you, and especially when you start trying to spread it around. And say, hey, you know what? A friend of mine who is undergoing chemo, you know how shitty chemo is? Just sleep with this amethyst rock under your pillow and stop doing the chemo. And then the person who's looking for fucking hope in that situation decides to accept that.
Yeah.
That's where I'm like, you're pissing me off.
Yeah.
That's a line.
We don't want to have bad beliefs because they can cause harm, and like different beliefs have different potentials for harm as well. Like if your example is like people are actively experimenting and trying to solve real problems that they have. My coworker, for example, I don't think has any problems that she's trying to solve with this particular belief. This belief isn't
not that she's telling you about.
Not that she's telling me about.
I want to ask.
Might want to.
The thing with a lot of the people that start having that kind of rhetoric, it's because they believe that it works for whatever reason, and they'll give you the reason. And sometimes they're open to evidence that are contrary to it. Sometimes they're not. Yeah. And this is where, as we were talking about earlier with the anti-vax conversation, a lot of it applies to this. Yeah. That sometimes there's certain debate tactics that you can use in order to convince people of things, but it involves somebody being open to learning at the same time.
Yeah, it's true. Anti-vax, that's one of those things where I don't give two shits about your feelings. Like, that's a conversation we gotta have because that's super harmful. Energy crystals. Yeah, I think that has a large potential. I probably haven't seen as many examples where that's happening. I don't know anybody that's actively tried to use it, but it's been more passive from my perspective. But being
a polytheist, I run into this stuff sometimes. Right, so it's
I've ran into the healing crystal things myself.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that it's not. I talk about it like it's just a polytheist thing. I've seen most people that I've seen advocate for the crystal thing are atheists. They're not pagans. They're atheists. And but they hold to this kind of stuff. Or New Age. I mean, a lot of New Agers are also atheists. They lack a belief in God or something like that, or they deny the existence of God or whatever it is that we want to define it as.
Sure.
But a lot of them, it's not a God belief that they're having. It's not informed by a God belief necessarily.
No.
But it's still a strange position that is in opposition to easily demonstrated empirical evidence that you can just lay out in front of people and say, hey, look, it doesn't work. There isn't even a correlation.
Yeah. Well, Murder Man. Go ahead. Give last final thoughts here as we wrap it up.
The reason I actually posit that the reason that's happening is because, remember how I said that all of my actions and communications are ultimately tracing back to a psychological core value. Well, a lot of these people, if they value something different than truth, right, as their ultimate value, let's say something like safety and comfort, for example, if that's
or hope or something,
or some other value, then that's gonna literally change the entire way you engage with everything.
Yeah.
So they may not even acknowledge that what they're doing is dishonest because they're seeking out that safety and comfort or hope or whatever it is, and they're getting it from the thing they want. So that's why they're propagating the idea.
Yep.
Not because they want to hurt people. They are trying to express their own, what they think their own meaning, subjective value that they use to view the entire world through to others.
100% agree with you there. 100%. Psychological safety is a reason why people keep their beliefs. And that's something you have to recognize and acknowledge if you're even thinking about changing somebody's mind about something, because that's going to have repercussions.
I to speak a little bit with experience on that. There was I was dating a Christian girl a little while, and her grandmother decided it came out that I was not a Christian. And her grandmother decided to sit me down, and she wanted to have the come to Jesus conversation. And I had to make a choice in that instance of what kind of arguments I wanted to employ, because I was more interested. I decided at that point in time that I was more interested in using a deflection strategy of thanks for this information, I'll think about it, so on and such as, because if you use counter arguments and you take faith away from somebody who is 70 plus, that can be a really, really bad situation for that person.
Yep. Well, that was a really great topic to bring up, Murder Man, and we went a couple different directions there, but all of them super relevant and all of them super interesting. Thanks again for calling, and I hope you call again.
No problem, man. I've always liked your show. Keep it going, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling, Murder Man. It's good talking to you.
Yeah, take care. Wow, what an eventful episode there. We have Murder Man's calling in. We have people trying to murder me in studio. All kinds of stuff. Oh, there they are. There's our staff right there who helped make the show awesome. Yes, Matt thankfully has gone home at this point, which I'm really thankful for. Unless he's waiting for me outside. I did see him walk out the door earlier, but we'll see when I get to my car. If you don't see me next week, you'll know why. So just putting that out there. Well, Ocean, it's been really awesome talking to you today, and thank you again for being on the show. Where can people find you at?
You can find me on my YouTube channel at Ocean Keltoi. That's KELTOI, and I'm on Twitter and Twitch as well. So I'm mostly active on Twitter and YouTube, and I make stuff on talking about polytheism. I have I'll also put up criticisms of Christianity. I also have some criticisms of atheism and anti-theism. But the big thing that I'm looking for, as far as a lot of those conversations, is finding areas of disagreement, places where we can work together. And that's, as like, people that have interacted with me know a lot about that I'm very much interested in finding common ground in areas where we can actually work together.
Yes, work together. I can't sing anything on here because I don't know if YouTube catches people singing stuff and if that's like a copyright thing that happens. I'm not willing to find out, but I don't know any good. You wouldn't want to hear me sing. You would want to hear me sing actually, but you really don't. Anyway, let's wrap this show up. I'm Objectively Dan. This is Truth Wanted. This happens live every week at 7 p.m. Central Time. If you're listening to this on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, then you already know that you can listen to it there, but you should definitely check it out on YouTube if you haven't already. Join in the chats. It's really fun. I do read them contrary to popular belief. I don't always read everything that goes on out loud. I really maybe should do that more in the future, but you guys are hilarious. You can also catch me on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan, and you can email me at truth@atheist-community.org. We also have a Discord server for the Atheist Community of Austin, which you should check out. I pop in every once in a while. Ocean hangs out on there sometimes. Definitely come see us on there. And there's a Facebook page as well for Truth Wanted, which you should definitely check out. Also, if you really like the show and you want to contribute, you should go to patreon.com/truthwanted. All that money goes directly to the show and directly to the ACA. I do not receive a cent of it personally. It all goes to making shows like this one even better than they already are. Ocean, is there anything you want to say before we wrap things up for tonight?
Just thanks for having me on, man. I think that I know that we've been talking about it for some time now, and I'm glad that it's finally happened. And I enjoy it. I love this kind of stuff. So, dude, thank you so much.
Yeah, dude. Like, having you on has been really, really fun. Like, I like hanging out with you, man. It's just
I like hanging out with you.
We get good stories. Like, weird shit happens when we hang out. Like, people. We make other people uncomfortable, or people try to make me uncomfortable through intimidation tactics, I suppose, and karate moves. So, who knows what happens next when we have you on. But I'd love to have you on again. And yeah, thanks again for joining us tonight. But until next time, folks, that about wraps it up for another episode of Truth Wanted. Remember, always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.